All right, I'm here with Congressman Jim Baird. Congressman, thank you for joining us. It's the first time we've spoken to you since the car accident your wife and yourself were in. How are you and Mrs. Baird doing?
We're recovering. We're happy to be here, and we appreciate the prayers and the thoughts of everyone that have extended to us, and we appreciate the divine intervention.
What happened, and what's your message for those constituents who've reached out and wished you and your wife well in the midst of this?
Well, we just want to say thank you. It's very much appreciated. It's very helpful and encouraging. And with the amount of bruising and so on that both my wife and I had, it is going to take time to do some recovery. So having people express their care and concern really does expand or entice you to want to move forward. But I'd like to also say that we're both committed to making sure that we do our job and letting people in the district have representation on some of the things we're doing. So we feel it's important, and we're making the extra effort to try to be here just because we care. We care about the country. We care about the people. We care about the things that we think are important for us to move forward and for our children and grandchildren. So we are making an extra effort. I'm not wanting sympathy about that. I'm just saying that we think it's important.
Well, and you've been back there in Washington for a lot of votes that have been taking place and a lot of things that have been happening in the nation's capital. And I'm going to ask you in a minute about a bill that you've proposed on hemp and what the protections for farmers should be in those scenarios. But I also want to ask you about a poll that came out today from Emerson that shows a number of voters opposing some of the priorities of the Trump administration. His approval rating at 43% in this poll. It showed voters opposing the United States adding Greenland as a territory by a margin of 50 to 28. It showed 57% of voters thinking that ICE's presence in communities has been more harmful than beneficial, and 56% of voters saying they think the country is on the wrong track. Are you concerned that many of the policies you've supported that the Trump administration has proposed or enacted aren't broadly supported by a majority of Americans in this recent poll?
Well, I really pay attention to what our people feel and what they want done. But on the other hand, I see things happening that have not been happening over the last 2 or 3 decades that many of us feel should have happened. I'm talking about closing the border, reducing inflation. Inflation has really had an impact on agriculture. The rising cost of inputs and so on has been very impactful. In fact, we've been upside down for 2 or 3 years, and now we're in a situation where we're concerned about that. And so when you think about those policies that have been and actions that have been taken, it's extremely important, and I think successful in many ways. Now, is everything perfect? Probably not. I don't know that we do anything perfect all the time, but the things that we are doing and the president has done, closing the border, the inflation, the reducing energy costs, making things more affordable for all of us, particularly housing, all of those are important for people to be successful. And we want them to have, and Indiana has done a great job, in my opinion, of creating a positive business climate. And this all adds to their ability, or people's ability, small businesses' ability to really make progress. And
these polls, yeah, my apologies, go ahead.
Well, I just think you have to look at the overall broad picture and the progress that's been made by this president in this term, and what hasn't been done in the previous administrations and so on, and how long we've talked about some of the, like stopping fentanyl coming across the border and killing all of our people. We've lost more people during that than we have some of the wars that we've been in. So I remain positive about the progress that was being made, but I'm always mindful of the impact it's having on our people.
Well, these polls seem to suggest that a majority of voters think the administration has gone too far on issues like Greenland and the patrols that ICE has been doing in American cities. Do you share any of their concerns that perhaps some of these policies have gone too far?
Well, you know, you always need to be aware of the consequences of the actions that you take. But when you think about we're removing the worst of the worst of this 20 million or so, or how many ever that we've come across the border, and we're finding those in those communities and removing them, and provides a safer environment for children and our families. I'm just amazed at some of the things that we're finding that these individuals have done just here in this last few years. So do we want to keep an eye on making sure we're not going too far? Certainly. But at this point, I think it's important that we correct what's taking place in our country and in our communities. I want my grandchildren to be able to walk out in their communities and feel safe. I want to be able to go to school and feel safe and not have someone lurking in the shadows that might do them harm.
Well, we've also heard of instances where U.S. citizens have been taken into custody by ICE. Does that concern you?
Well, you really don't know for sure exactly what happened. So I like to make sure that I remember in combat, they say the first reports are never accurate. So I want to make sure we get the appropriate information and make sure we're treating people fairly and making decisions based on reality and not assumption or not emotion.
Yeah. I do also want to ask you about the bill that you're proposing in terms of hemp and protecting planting predictability. What is this legislation all about? What do you hope it does for farmers in this line of work?
Well, we alluded to the situation agriculture's in just a while earlier. And so this may not impact all agricultures and all producers, but the thing that I saw that wasn't appropriate was to just come in through a stroke of a pen and almost eradicate an industry. Well, I think that industry, and many of them have invested a significant amount of dollars for that program. In fact, we encourage them to get into the raising industrial hemp. And you know, it was used back in World War II for making rope. It's such a strong fiber. And then when we discussed it when I was in the Indiana legislature, we talked about and found out that the automobile industry could use the fibers from industrial hemp to make door panels because it didn't shatter like something like plastic and so on would. So, and then we had companies in the state of Indiana who were importing the hemp. So we created a situation or an environment that encouraged farmers to look at another opportunity here. And that's what we're trying to protect, is give the hemp industry and the industrial hemp, and give farmers and the whole industry the opportunity to really develop an appropriate plan. And a lot of times people don't understand that agriculture, you know, as soon as you harvest one crop, you really start planning for the next one. And so when you come in and retroactively or even just immediately put a stop or put an end to some kind of an industry that you've encouraged development in, then that's not helpful to agriculture. And agriculture is the basis of all of our communities, our rural communities. And so we need to keep them strong. And that's why we propose appropriate agriculture bill, farm bill, because of that. And so this bill, then, to get back to your question, this bill just simply gives us a 2-year extension on making the decision on what that industry, and gives the industry an opportunity to adjust. And many of them have probably already made planting predictions and maybe purchased raw materials and the ingredients they need to put in that crop. And so if we stop it all of a sudden, that's not fair to them. So this just asks for a 2-year extension to give the whole industry an opportunity to come up with an appropriate relative extension or a relative solution.
Are you hopeful you can get this bill through Congress and get it in front of the president? What are its chances of advancing through the process?
Well, you know, it's been interesting, some of the people that have joined us on this bill, and it's particularly important to states like Indiana, and it's important to states like Kentucky, even Minnesota. So we had Jamie Comer from Kentucky join on the bill. Tim Moore from North Carolina has joined on the bill. Gabe Evans from Colorado Angie Craig from Minnesota. All of that has been kind of gives you a feeling and an indication of the widespread support and bipartisan support that we have for this effort.
Congressman Jim Baird, thank you so much for joining us, and glad that you and your wife are doing well after the car accident here earlier this month. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman. We really appreciate it.
Take care.